Anthony Joshua versus Jermaine Franklin this Saturday at the O2 Arena. Let's talk about it. Now, I know there are going to be people hammering the comment section, perplexed as to why I'm doing a breakdown video for this fight. They see it as a foregone conclusion already. Joshua's won. It's his fight to win. He just has to go in there, turn up on the night, and he gets a W. I understand that point. Obviously, this is a fight that some people are dissatisfied with. I get it 100%. But myself, I see this fight as an interesting fight. I've said it quite a few times recently. I'm interested in this fight without necessarily being excited. Um, this is a fight that I feel there are some unknowns. Of course, we have Jermaine Franklin, who is taking another step up. We're going to see how he deals with this level, because in his last fight against Dillian Whyte, which was really his most notable fight, he showed a good amount of ability. Many people thought that he beat Dillian Whyte. Um, Joshua is coming back from back-to-back losses. It's going to be interesting to see where his mind is. What kind of attitude does he adopt when he's in the ring? Because there's been talk of him returning, going back to the old AJ rather than the more timid current AJ that we've seen recently. Also, will there be any technical or tactical tweaks since he's been working under Derek James? So that kind of stuff, it interests me. So, you know what, I'm going to give my 2 cents and give a breakdown to this fight. So, starting with Jermaine Franklin, I actually really like his style. You know, I watched the Dillian Whyte fight, in which I thought Dillian Whyte won that fight. However, I have no issue with people who think that Jermaine Franklin won. And you can go back to my video on that. I said, even though I picked Dillian Whyte to win, I thought he did win. I was way more impressed with Jermaine Franklin. He really surprised me, because I'd seen some previous footage. He looked, he looked okay, but I didn't think it was anything special. And I don't really think he's anything special now, but I've got to give him credit for his ability, because he's someone who clearly knows his way around the ring. Looks to have actually some pedigree. He can move around the ring quite well. He's a very good counterpuncher. I don't think he really gets credit for his counterpunching ability. He can counter with both hands, left hooks and right hands. And there's a sharpness to his counters as well. And he also has a bit of a slick defense where he rolls with shots, he blocks them. And for a shorter heavyweight, he actually does a good job fighting guys who have, or at least Dillian Whyte, who, maybe not as tall, or not that much taller than Jermaine Franklin, but more ring coverage, as Dwight would say. He's got those really long arms, does Dillian Whyte. And Franklin, he showed a good ability to deal with the jab. And that kind of made me think, okay, looking at Franklin here, to maybe get a bit of an insight into how Joshua may deal with it, or deal with Franklin in this fight, I revisited Joshua's fights with Andy Ruiz, in particular the first fight. More so the first fight, because in the second fight, Joshua was a bit more defensive. He didn't want to engage with Ruiz in any kind of position to trade. He wanted to box and move, play to his strengths, basically. Whereas in the first Ruiz fight, Joshua was willing to be a bit more adventurous with his offense. He took a few more risks. And Joshua was really doing some good boxing for the first 3 rounds. Obviously, he lost that fight in the end, but I think Joshua displayed a good balance of defense and offense in that first Ruiz fight. But one thing Ruiz did, Ruiz also being a smaller heavyweight, in terms of stature and reach, certainly not weight. Ruiz is a big old boy. You don't see someone with a waist like Ruiz's and you call him small. But as a small heavyweight, in terms of the height and the ring coverage, yeah, definitely. But one thing Ruiz and Franklin do quite well is they use the right hand parry. And now you might be thinking, outmatch, a lot of fighters do that. Yeah, of course they do. But it's the utilization of it, because when you're a taller fighter and you've got a long reach, you're enjoying quite an advantage at long range. So if you're a shorter fighter going up against a taller fighter with a longer reach, you need to find a way of nullifying it. If you have a fighter who's quite a lot of their work comes off of the jab. You need to find a way of taking that jab away. And Franklin and um, Ruiz have very good jab defense. They use the right hand parry, and they use it in a number of ways. So both of them, they kind of have like two main go-tos with that right hand parry. They will either parry and jab simultaneously. So as they advance with a jab, that right hand is up in front of the face to simultaneously parry as they shoot their own. Simultaneous parry jab set piece, if you will. But then there's also a sequential parry jab in which they will parry, and that will be its own movement, and from there they either step in with a jab or a bit more of a left cross, that kind of motion. And they both use it to quite good effect, and I was really impressed with Franklin's ability to do that. He was very sharp with it and very accurate, and it's a good thing to see when you have a short heavyweight going up against bigger guys. That's the kind of approach you want to see. It's like, okay, you're jabbing with the jabber almost. And I was very impressed with Franklin's ability to do that. And I'm just thinking though, I'm not sure if that is enough for AJ, because Anthony Joshua does have a good jab. He understands how to mix it up quite well. Maybe not the most fluid, but he understands the application and the utilization of different types of jab. And he, in the Kevin Johnson fight, he understood that Kevin Johnson was trying to do something similar. Even though Johnson wasn't advancing, he was using to parry and jab the same way that Franklin does sometimes. And Joshua, good IQ, he doesn't get that much credit for his boxing IQ, but he understood this, and he deliberately jabbed at Johnson's parry, anticipating that jab in return, and he actually used quite a good pull counter, and that really spelled the end of the fight for Kevin Johnson. We've also seen Joshua use his pull counter against Kubrat Pulev, who himself has a good jab. So it's not something that Joshua uses often, but I feel like it may be a factor here in this fight against Jermaine Franklin. Jermaine Franklin, quite slippery, quite good defense. He's already a smaller target, and he understands how to mess with range. He can come in and smother you, maybe get under an arm and kind of force himself underneath you. At other times, he'll use his feet and just step out of distance. Really does control range quite well. However, sometimes Franklin won't always use the parry. Sometimes he will, especially if you attack him with straight shots, sometimes he'll opt to kind of roll away and then duck into the back half of his stance. Now, this is a very defensive posture. It's something that, say, Mayweather did a fair bit in the end of his career. Devin Haney does it a hell of a lot these days. Gets a little bit excessive, not in terms of just the frequency of how often they do it, but how low they go. Because if you go below the waist, you can't do that. It's against the rules. You go to any boxing gym in your local area and you do that in sparring, they'll tell you to stop because it's against the rules. But, in the heat of the moment, heat of the action, a lot of fighters get away with it. But the thing is, it's a limited position because you're kind of hiding all your available targets away from your opponent. But at the same time, you can't attack them with anything without having to move a long way first. So I'm thinking, if Joshua is able to threaten Franklin, get him into that position, maybe we could see Joshua being a little bit more physical, maybe stiff-arming Franklin, holding him down there, and then releasing some kind of chopping downward offense towards him. Maybe he'll wait until Franklin returns from that position into a more neutral position and time in there. Although I do think the latter is a bit more unlikely, just because Franklin, as I say, he might come up and then just step off and get a bit more distance. However, that's probably going to be based on where he is in the ring in that moment. If he's in the corner, if he's against the ropes, he's not going to have space to move back. So, yeah, I think a lot of this comes down to what kind of approach Joshua takes. As I say, I just don't see him being that cautious, as cautious as he was in the Ruiz fight. However, he does have to be a bit wary, Joshua, because Franklin does have those good counters, quite slippery and good defense. And Yeah, he may not be the puncher that Ruiz is, but Franklin, he's got that sharpness to him. He, I don't think he has to punch as hard as Andy Ruiz. You know, if Joshua gets caught with a couple of shots that he doesn't see coming, that might be enough to buzz him. We know Joshua doesn't have the best set of whiskers out there, and so he's definitely going to have to take his time. And I think that's what Joshua's probably. It's when he, that's how he's going to get off his best work is um, being in range, but at his range, not in range of Franklin. Just really maximising his reach and looking to see how Franklin reacts to Joshua's offense. Now, Joshua, I don't think he needs to give too much away. Really, just look to pressure with the jab, um, almost like being fairly upright, but not in a way where he's stiff, but just upright where he's away from Franklin, and just maximizing that distance and seeing how Franklin reacts, and then basically tailoring his offense off of the back of that. Um, I give Franklin a lot of credit for his ability, but I think it has to be said that that was against Dylan White. And Dylan in that fight was not overly aggressive, but he spent a lot of that fight coming forwards, closing the distance and closing the range down, kind of fighting at mid and close range, which is going to favour the shorter fighter. It's going to play into the shorter fighter's hands. And if we compare Dylan and Joshua, Dylan's nowhere near as sharp as AJ, and I don't think he even has the same authority on his long shots. Dylan is a great fighter in his own right. I know some people are going to disagree with me, but he's got some very good attributes, but his coordination isn't the best. He doesn't really have that sharpness. He's a bit uncoordinated, a bit lumbering, Dylan sometimes, and Joshua, he really tightens his shots up quite well, and so even against shorter fighters, like one example that comes to mind was when Joshua fought Takam. Now Takam, not too dissimilar in height to Franklin, also much more compact compared to Joshua, or a fighter of Joshua's dimensions. But Joshua has a good ability to really tighten up his power shots, the hooks, the uppercuts, and he actually floored Carlos Takam on a really, really short, tight counter. I think it was a catch and shoot left hook. That was really impressive. Plenty of fighters have done that in the past, but when you factor in the size difference and the way Joshua was able to get that kind of offense off against a shorter guy, it was quite impressive. I feel like he may be able to do the same against Franklin, because even though Franklin has his own counters, even with the catch and counter himself, his defensive responsibility it's not always there. It's not very consistent. And now Joshua, you could say the same for him. However, who lasts? Who takes the other person's power better? Does Franklin take Joshua's power better, or does Joshua take Franklin's power better? I think Joshua, even though he probably can't afford to take too many shots, I think he's going to have the more damaging offense. And Franklin, he was buzzed a couple times against White, but showed good powers of recovery and good kind of. He was in the moment. He was present. He was, did have a good defense for a lot of it. But as I say, Dylan, not as sharp as Joshua, not as tidy. And Franklin's a good fighter. I think I've made that quite clear, my stance on Franklin and how much I rate him. But he is experienced. And his ability to fight tall guys who are good, I think, is questionable. I've gone through his resume, and there aren't many tall guys. There are not many tall guys of note. I think the last name that he fought with, who was like 6'5" or above, was Pavel Sauer, who is like 6'5", and Pavel Sauer, the less said about him, the better. That guy's had more losses than I've had hot dinners in my life. So how well Franklin does against a very capable, taller fighter like Joshua, as I say, is questionable. And I'm not going to hold my breath, to be honest. Franklin, he's a good fighter, but this is a different level. And I think we'll see that in this fight. Joshua, in the lead up to this fight, I was saying Joshua within 5, but I feel like maybe he's going to have a look, and Franklin may put a few little obstacles, some things that Joshua has to be wary of to not look bad, not get hit too much. So I think this one goes a bit longer than 5. I'm thinking maybe 6 or 7. I think he'll get to a point where once Joshua has kind of scoped out what Franklin does and how he reacts, he will begin to time Franklin, maybe catch him with something big. And I think as soon as he does, as long as he doesn't rush in and be reckless, I think he'll probably start to pick Franklin apart and maybe force like a referee stoppage in round 7. So yeah, I'm going for a Joshua stoppage in the mid rounds, specifically round 7. I think as long as Joshua, you know, no, I think he will. I think he will. It's just it comes down to his approach, comes down to his mindset. And I guess you have to factor in that Franklin, this is a big opportunity for him. It's a step up from Dylan White, so he does seem to be better prepared than he was for the White fight. Because even though he performed well, he didn't look like he was in tip-top shape. And there's been talk about how he didn't have very long to prepare for that. So I think he's going to be well prepared for this one. Take it in like towards the second half of the fight. But yeah, I think Joshua will get the time in once he's seen how Franklin deals with what Joshua has to offer. AJ will probably just get to him and take him out in round 7, as I say. But I'm repeating myself at this point. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, people. Are you even going to tune into this fight? I think I am. Yeah, I'm interested in this one. And let's see how it goes down. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Who are you picking and why? And I'll get back to you. But for now, people, thanks for listening. And I'll catch you on the next video.